you how excited I am for this evening. This is Library Salon number 35. We've been doing these for since 2015, and to have such a wonderful group of people come here tonight just fills my heart. My name is Kristen Frieda. I'm the director of the library here, and Eric and I put this on together to honor Fern. And so, Eric, would you like to?
Sure. Thank you, Kristen. Good evening. How's everyone doing? Good. Let's try it again. Good evening. How's everyone doing? Good. Fantastic, right? Great evening. As Kristen mentioned, my name is Eric Gutierrez. I'm the Director of Government Relations at Bank Street. I've been here since 2020, for over 4 years. It's a pleasure to be here as well in company with all of you, and of course, Fern Khan. On behalf of the Alumni Association, I want to welcome all of you this evening in celebration of Fern Khan, our dear friend and colleague, and of course, the launch of her new memoir. I want to do some little fun here, just to kind of see who's in the room. If you are an alum of the graduate school or school for children or Liberty Leads, please raise your hand. Okay, perfect. If you are a current or former faculty and staff of Bank Street in any division, please raise your hand. Okay, perfect. And then if you are a trustee and friend of Bank Street, please raise your hand. Nice, perfect, okay. So this is a perfect testament of all the years that Fern has lived, all the lives that Fern has touched over the years. It's a very diverse group, and we're all here in your honor, Fern. So this is very exciting, and can't wait to hear more. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce Victoria Hamilton, trustee of the Bank Street Board of Trustees, and Gussie Kapner, former president of Bank Street College.
When I got the opportunity to make the introduction, I went through a little bit of a period of thinking, how do I make this really important? Do I come up with if there's one word to describe her, is that grace? Is it kindness? Is it elegance? Is it? And I went through a few other things. I said, it's got to be really special. So I came up with the one solution to make it really special. I asked if Gussie would do it. You see why she's the board of trustees. Right. Okay, so Fern, yes, I'm one of those people whose life Fern has touched, and I need note cards for this, so sorry to video people. Okay, in 1995, after I had managed to survive the scrutiny of the Bank Street Board of Trustees, faculty, staff, parents, children, students, and a few others I probably left out, I joined Bank Street as the president here. And when I joined Bank Street, I found Fern here. And there began my 13-year journey with Fern here at Bank Street. Now, it was not the first time that I had worked with Fern. I had worked with Fern at LaGuardia Community College for 11 years, in the years from 1974 to 85. And so I had a little bit of a sense of what might await me here in terms of the whirlwind of activity that I knew Fern to be. I had seen her in action at LaGuardia, basically. I had seen her representing the college, going out to reach out to the community on behalf of LaGuardia, and creating programs for the incredibly diverse populations that surrounded LaGuardia Community College in Queens. There was a group of Polish, Italian, American feminists who wanted a community-based degree program. Fern made it. There were the children of recent immigrants who needed a children's college, but it had to be on Saturday, and Fern made it. There were endless numbers of youth who had aged out of the public school system for various reasons and had various needs, and Fern had many programs that she developed and created from the ground up that met those needs. Perhaps her best known program, which is still talked about today, was her absolutely magnificent program for deaf adults, which gave LaGuardia a very special niche and gave it a national reputation in terms of the deaf community and just unending respect and love from the deaf community. And people still talk about that today. We came to describe Fern as the person who really put community into community colleges, because that's really what she did for LaGuardia. So now fast forward 10 years, and here we are, a little bit older, deeper in debt, right? But it's deja vu all over again. Fern and I, this time at Bank Street College, Fern having moved from being a parent trustee here at the college to being the dean of continuing education. And she was already out in the community, everywhere, reaching out on behalf of Bank Street, creating programs where she could take Bank Street's resources and where she could form a partnership where Bank Street could work in a good way. As many of you, I'm sure, had some connection to those programs, there was, excuse me, there was, of course, the Bank Street Head Start program on the Lower East Side, which she put together. There was the Liberty Partnerships program, which still exists today as Liberty Leads. Is that what we call it today? Yeah. Okay. She brought that to fruition. There was the there were partnerships that she created with a whole variety of organizations and people. We had a partnership with the New York Times. We had a partnership with Stevens Institute of Technology. And of course, there was a partnership with the public schools of Newark. Through New Beginnings. Are there any New Beginnings people here? Yes, thank you. Where Fern was basically using her staff to help improve teaching and learning in the schools of the public schools of Newark. In the years that Fern and her staff worked in Newark, there was a slogan that the parents and the teachers of Newark came up with. And it said, "You can bank on Bank Street." And I always loved that, and that was due to Fern. So, Fern obviously is a master of partnerships, right? We had more partners than a square dance. We had many partners. And when she got bored of partnering on the Eastern Seaboard, she just went and revitalized the long trip and took Bank Streeters and took them out of the country and made all kinds of trips. And she managed to tie this all back to the words and values and life of Lucy Sprague Mitchell, which I thought was amazing. And it was a very good fit for Bank Street. People loved and still love working both for and with Fern, because she is very loyal to her staff, very protective of her staff, and they are just as loyal to her. And she can tell you who her staff members were 50 years ago, which is also quite amazing. Fern knows the value of humor. Her laugh, which you may have heard, is infectious. Folks here used to say to us that they could hear us laughing in the hallways. And those were even some difficult times, so they must have been wondering, what are they laughing about? But it does make work a lot more fun if you can do it with a little bit of laughter. Fern will move mountains if she thinks that something is right and needs to be done. And she will get you to move mountains if she thinks that something is right and needs to be done. And she certainly has gotten me to move a few small mountains in the times that we have worked together. Fern is one of the most resourceful people that I know. She can find you a translator of Urdu if you need one. She can find you a priest if you need one. She can find you a rabbi if you need one. She can find you an imam if you need one. And she has done all of those things for folks. She probably can get those folks to work together amicably in partnership because she is a master of partnerships. Betty Fortsheimer, previous board chair at Bank Street, once said of Fern that her Rolodex was as big as her heart. And I thought that was a wonderful description of Fern. Some of the other words that have been used, grace is one that Victoria used But some of the other words that have been used to describe Fern were imaginative, compassionate, creative, tolerant, indefatigable, endlessly optimistic. In my experience, Fern always gives people the benefit of the doubt. She always cuts them some slack. Some folks might say that's because she's a Virgo. And that Virgos are reputed to not allow the world to turn them into cynics. I am not a Virgo. Fern is an amazing communicator. She can, and does, talk to anyone, anywhere, anytime about anything. Her street corner conferences are infamous, right, Nafis?
Yes.
Okay. The one exception that I've been told about in terms of Fern's ability to talk with everyone is an instance in which she met Harry Belafonte, who apparently left Fern speechless. Right.
Oh my God. I just didn't know what to say to her. Oh my God.
At LaGuardia Community College, we used to use a version of the Athenian citizenship oath to leave the city far better than you found it. And I've always thought that that is precisely what Fern does. Wherever she goes, it doesn't matter where it is, she leaves the place and the people far better than she found them. And that's a real gift. That's a real gift. Not many people can do that. So I've known Fern, obviously, for a long time. And even though I've known her for 50 years now and crossed paths in our careers, I still often wondered, how did this person get to be the way she is? Because all of these things we've said about her are true. That doesn't seem possible. How did she get to be the person she is? And so I very much welcome this memoir, because through the reading of this memoir, I was able to begin to answer that question for myself, but in Fern's own words. And I think that was very, very important, because it helped me to begin to connect the dots between this curious Jamaican child and this person who we know as a high-powered, multi-nonprofit, working for free board member. So I think that Fern has told us a lot in her own voice about who she is, and I'm really happy that she is with us today so that we can hear more about that.
Wow. Well, thank you, Gussie. I hope that was taped so I can record it when I get much older and I want to hear some nice things. So anyway, if it's not recorded, then Nafis, you'll have to remember it.
I remembered everything.
Yeah.
I remembered everything.
Okay.
I just want to add and take the liberty to say that this is kind of an exciting moment for me to come back to Bank Street as always. But one thing that is really pairs well with what Gussie just said is apparently when I was around 4 or in the 4 or 5s, I was asked, tell us about your mother. And my response was one word: she works. And I think everything you just elaborated on, it embodies the fact that she's dedicated to everyone that she encounters. And if you're happen to be the young child that's late for school and you're walking on the street and she encounters somebody that she knows, you're going to have to wait for that conversation to run its course. No matter how much you try to pull or subtly hint that I have to be at Bank Street by 8 o'clock because I want to be in the lobby and meet all my friends. Right. She's still gonna graciously engage with everyone that she encounters, and I think that's actually something that myself, and I can speak for my brothers too. Speaking of which, one of them, I can speak for my brothers too, that we all really do mirror and try to enact in every way that we live our lives, right? Both professionally, personally. And so it's a real pleasure to watch from the other side, right? We see her come home, we see her, but very much part of, she embodies everything that she does and what she cares for and the empathy that she carries. So, Mom, good job. You set a great example for us. You set a great example for us. And so one thing I will share with this memoir in particular that was really fascinating is that it was a long journey. It was a long journey, not just because she's of an age. It's a long journey of the story to come together. And it was really fascinating to see her take on different parts, and different parts that were different stories came up in different moments. So when she's wondering about her education that she experienced and connecting it to what I was studying about the history of black schools in the South and making those connections, it was fascinating for me to see how these worlds collide, right? Of the experiences that she had in the 60s in New York and how that connected to what I was learning about in the 2000s. And so this was one of those journeys that I think all of us kind of took on different moments and saw it evolve into what it came to be in this memoir. So it's a real testament to not just the life that she's lived, but also the dedication to seeing it through. It was a long journey, I think, to get this book out.
It was.
It was.
Yes,
It was.
Yeah, it was.
So, if I may, I was curious if you could tell just a little bit about what led you to want to write this book and want to tell your story, because we all know, as Gussie kind of said, we don't get to hear too much about you. You're so dedicated to everybody else and making sure everyone around you is taken care of, and we oftentimes don't hear about you as much. So, what led you to want to write your story?
Well, I think even before I retired from Bank Street, which was in 2012, I had so many stories in my head about all the experiences that I've had growing up in Jamaica, the experiences I had there, meeting different people. I was exposed to a whole variety of all kinds of Jamaicans, and they're all different kinds of Jamaicans. And some are wonderful, some are not. And so as a child, I learned to differentiate who was sincere, who was not, who was helpful, and so on. And then, by chance, I didn't have any plans of coming to America. All the people around me were hoping that they would get a chance to get that visa, that coveted visa, to come to America. But it was very difficult because at that time, the McCarran Act prevented people who came from countries with a lot of people of color from coming here. So in Jamaica, I think, and I grew up in the 40s and 50s, I think 100 people were allowed annually from Jamaica to come here. So it was a very trying time for a lot of Jamaicans. But then I had a friend who came here, and this friend invited me to come to America. And she said, you can come, you can study, you can work and work your way through school and pay for school. And it was intriguing. I said, but I didn't know anything really about America because I heard only little things. And we knew a lot about the artists who came down to Jamaica to sing or to whatever it was. We were happy to see them. We had a lot of sports people who came down to Jamaica. But I didn't know really very much about America. And I didn't know a lot about, and what Nafis mentioned, I didn't know anything about what was happening in terms of racial discussions. We just never participated in racial discussions when I was growing up. So I have to keep remembering, it's the 40s and the 50s. We were still a colony in Jamaica. At the time, we were a colony of Britain. And we felt, children like me, we felt safe being part of the British Empire. We really felt safe and protected. So that's why I grew up feeling very safe, very comfortable, going everywhere, walking around, etc. But it's a long story to tell to answer your question.
It's okay.
But anyway, so I got this letter, this invitation to come. And after pondering around it, I said, well, maybe I should come. My best friend was here, and I thought, gee, that would give me a chance to see her again. So I wrote back and said I would come here. And there's a part I think I would like to read.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to read that short part.
Yeah.
About, because it tells you something about Jamaica, it tells you something about the attitude there, how difficult it was to get a visa, and, well, thank you. I know I can't read this little
Just like me.
Wow. All right, let me see if I can find it. It's very short. Wait, no. Okay. So in order to come here, you had to have a visa. And I was supposed to come on what was called a student visa, which is very different from a permanent visa. So I had all my papers in hand. I got my first medical examination because in Jamaica, my parents didn't take their children to doctors unless it was really serious. We use home medicines. And so I got my first examination at 17 by a doctor to get approval that I was healthy to come here. So I got all my papers prepared and I went to visit the American Council. Although I have no memory of being anxious, I am sure that I experienced some anxiety when my name was called to meet the examining officer. Since an applicant's fate hung on the examining officer's approval or rejection, entering his office was an anxiety-producing event. Furthermore, this was my first visit to an American establishment on the island, and I had no idea what to expect. The officer, a white American, was seated behind an attractive yet modest wooden desk. He was properly and professionally dressed for his position, wearing an immaculately clean and well-ironed white shirt and tie and dark trousers. The room was relatively spacious and uncluttered, with an American flag in one corner, a bookcase against one wall, and a ceiling fan. Every place in Jamaica had a ceiling fan. He greeted me politely and pleasantly and invited me to sit. Whatever anxiety I had lessened tremendously, and I relaxed and prepared myself to answer all his questions. Glancing around the room, I thought about the many stories this room held quietly to itself over many years. Stories of joy and relief where so many lives were transformed. And the years of hoping and waiting to be called were at last fulfilled. Some individuals had gotten through, that's how we talk in Jamaica, that unpredictable process, and now they could begin a new chapter in their lives. The same room had also seen tears of disappointment and real sadness when the officer had rejected or turned down an applicant. The room probably wished that it could offer some comfort, but couldn't. If only the room could talk, it would have comforted that applicant. On leaving the American consulate, the applicant would have to tell everyone, I didn't get through. But he or she would persist, and so would apply for that visa again and again. After looking at my application and having a brief conversation, the officer asked about my intentions on completing my college degree. I replied confidently, I will return to Jamaica to work. He looked at me seriously and stated, Miss Spence, you will not return to Jamaica. Imagine my surprise. Of course, I protested and stressed that I knew I would return to Jamaica. He listened attentively, but knowingly, said no more, approved my application, handed me my visa, and wished me well. I was on my way to study in the United States.
So once you got that, you got passed through, right? You got through. Was it a feeling of elation? Were you were so nervous beforehand? Was it you felt, I'm just glad it's over? Do you remember how you felt when you found out I'm able to go to the US, I had this visa?
I guess it was a mixture. I was happy and relieved because, after all, I was one of those who got through. even though mine was a student visa, which was much easier to get at that time, but still students were often turned down, so I still was happy. Yes, I was excited until I reached on the plane. And I was, I remember feeling, did I make a mistake? And why am I leaving my comfortable place in Jamaica, an island where everything was so beautiful? Life was hard. We didn't have a lot of money, but the place was wonderful and people I knew were great, and I had a wonderful time growing up. And I loved Kingston and I loved my high school, and I just had a lot of friends and family. And I began to really miss Jamaica while being on the plane. But then at the same time, I looked forward to what might be ahead. I had no idea where I was going or what I was going to do. I knew very little about what was going to happen. And the first thing that occurred to me, I landed in Chicago in September. The weather was cold. I had no coat. I had no sweater. I had just summer sleeve dresses. And the first morning on Michigan Avenue, I froze. And I had not been prepared at all, obviously. I hadn't done it, my research had not been done. And my friend had gotten me this job in a Chinese restaurant. And so I started to work the second day I arrived. I worked very hard, but when I went home at night, I said, oh my gosh, I have no clothes. What am I going to do? I have no sweaters. So there was a big group of Jamaicans in Chicago who were doing quite well. And the people I was staying with, my friends, they sent out a message. And so I got a winter coat, I got sweaters, and I got clothes. But I wasn't happy in Chicago. And every night for a week, I remember crying, I want to go back to Jamaica. But that was the last time I cried about going to Jamaica. And then I came to New York, and that was it.
So when you came to New York and to NYU, right,
Yes.
what were you thinking about what you wanted to study? Because you had this plan of getting an education, but not sure what you still wanted to do professionally, right?
Right.
So how did you find where you wanted to land?
Well, I knew I wanted to work with people. That was my thing. Even when I was in Jamaica, I loved working with people. And I had worked as a civil servant for 1 year. And that was a government job. And that was a permanent job. And I was 16 at the time, but I was a civil servant. And I was really happy because that was a good job. In Jamaica, it's permanent. And when you retire, maybe you get a gold watch at the end of your, Yes, so I had heard that. So I was really happy in Jamaica. But when I came to New York, and I found NYU in the Yellow Pages. I didn't know anything about NYU, but I found that that's what we used at that time. This was in the early 50s. And so I looked in the Yellow Pages and I saw this university. And I had to be in a university because if I wasn't, I would be sent back to Jamaica. So I went to NYU and I showed my student visa and my passport, and I got accepted. And it was the most glorious time for me. I loved NYU. Every organization that existed, I was part of that organization. It was just such an amazing time. And I think I devoted 3 chapters just about my life at NYU. I joined the Catholic Center. I'm not Catholic, I'm an Anglican. But Father O'Reilly was so wonderful. I still remember him. He was just amazing. And so he was very interested in foreign students, and he wanted to help foreign students to adjust to America. And so he used to plan trips to take us to homes of Americans so that we could understand something about American lives. Then we went on trips to parks where we had picnics. We even went to Hyde Park, to the Roosevelt home, and that was where I met Eleanor Roosevelt. And we didn't know she was going to be there that day. And we had a small, very small group, maybe 10 of us, mostly men. They were mostly from Europe, you know. And there I was, and she spoke with us. She stayed and spoke with us. Then I went up to her and said, you know, I'd love to have your autograph. I really didn't know much about her. But I said, and she said, I cannot, I'm in a hurry and I have another meeting, but you leave your name and your address with my secretary and she will send it to you. Well, I was kind of peeved that because nobody else was going to ask her. You know, men don't usually ask for autographs, and those students from Europe, they're not interested in her. And I knew them, so I knew they wouldn't ask. So she didn't give me her autograph. And I was a little annoyed. So I didn't leave my name with this. And I regretted it because today I could have had her autograph. And I regretted it. But later when I learned more about her and her work, I became an ardent admirer of her. So it worked out okay. It worked out okay. But NYU offered me, and this is something that I try to encourage younger people to look for opportunities. You know, when they're before you, don't reject them, explore them, talk to people about them if you're not sure. And so I was there, I guess I was just open for opportunities, whatever was legitimate and seemed to enhance my own growth, I would take it. So I joined the West Indian Student Association, I joined the Catholic Center, I joined
International House.
yeah, the International Student Center, which was funded by an outside source, but it was again, what I didn't say was in the 50s, foreign students were a novelty in New York. There weren't a lot of foreign students in New York. Today, there are a dime a dozen, but then in the 50s, there were not. And so people were very kind to us, and you know, and so, what was I telling you?
You're talking about the organizations and international.
Oh, right,
students.
international students.
That's because you met your husband.
Yes,
We were wondering what you did.
There was a president there. There was a certain president there.
yeah, so the International Student Center, I heard that it existed on 30th Street and 3rd Avenue. And so I got my friend Winsome and another friend. I had some nice Jamaican friends, and we said, let's go and explore what it's all about. And it was a place where foreign students went to dance on a Saturday night. And we paid 25 cents to get in. And if you didn't have the 25 cents, you were let in anyway. It didn't matter. It was just a great place. And that going to that center the first night, when we were walking up the stairs, we heard the music, then it stopped, and then we heard this person welcoming everyone, and just, you know, very nice, humble voice listening. And so I came, and there I met him, I saw him in front, and there was this cute young man, and he had this shock of white hair right here, and he was just he looked so angelic, almost. I mean, almost. But he was so.
I never heard that description of. Wow.
He was really. I really liked him just seeing how he looked and appeared. And so at the end of his speech, I walked up to him with my friends, and I said, you know, who I am, and that we had heard about the center, and we would like to be members. And so he welcomed us, and that was Ismail. That's where I met him. Later on, he became my husband. But he was the president at the time of the organization, and he had been a student at Columbia University working on at that time, his master's. So he was an engineer and a city planner, but was really interested in literature and, you know, literature and what else?
And engineering, and economics, and history, reading.
But he was also, if you know about Sufism, when he was young, he was very attracted to Sufism, but that was his nature. Anyway, so that's my
Yeah.
experience at NYU.
Good, good.
And I mean, I did so much. I went to night court at NYU as part of my course, and I was sitting in the audience waiting on the court to begin the session, and I heard my name. Will Miss Spence please stand up? And you know, the place is packed with people, and that was my maiden name. And so I said, I am Miss Spence. So I stood up and walked up, but I'm afraid. I said, why are they calling me? And so the judge whispered to me, come and sit beside me. You will see much better from here. And then he explained everything that was going on. So those were the kinds of experiences, and I have been turned to this side. Those are the kinds of experiences that I had in New York and at NYU. So it was just an incredible experience. Anyway, that's enough for NYU.
So I was going to ask is, you've had a lot of different roles at Bank Street,
Yeah.
and you've known it and been connected to Bank Street for quite a while, right? Now, I always thought it was just because of us, my brothers and I, but it wasn't. Apparently so. Apparently it wasn't just us, and it's not just about us. So if you could tell a little bit about the connection before you coming to join Bank Street to work here, what you knew about Bank Street, and then once you got here, to love to hear more, as Gussie mentioned earlier, the long trips, which you started up again in the 90s. And so, yeah, what was your connection with Bank Street prior to joining?
When I was working at Hunter College, there was an educational clinic at Hunter. Many years ago, Hunter College was sued because they had an early childhood program for kids who were like 4 to 6. And, do you remember that? And there were no kids of color in that program. Yet it was all about tax levy monies. And so the early childhood program through Hunter, they were sued. And they won the case. And so the judge said, I want you to ensure that there is a third African American children, a third Latino children, and a third white children in the early childhood program. Well, it was a shock to everyone, but they quickly hired 6 psychologists and 2 social workers.
Good.
At that time, this was a great society, Lyndon Johnson's great society. There was a lot of money coming into the city. Head Start had started. And so there were many Head Start programs, early childhood programs. And so the clinic sent the psychologists around to those centers to test the children. And the social workers worked with the families to help them to understand the culture of Hunter. And I was hired to replace the one of 2 social workers. She had left temporarily to go to one of the islands. Her husband was from an island. And so I got her job as a replacement for 1 year. She had been on a faculty line, was an assistant professor. And so I interviewed for the job and I got it. And I was working there for about 2-3 years. And I met this wonderful woman. Her name was Janet Lieberman, Dr. Janet Lieberman. She was a psychologist. And Janet was a doer. She was a mover and a shaker. And she really didn't, she wasn't too fond of waiting for things to happen. She liked to make them happen. And so all her colleagues, the other psychologists, they were more, let's talk and so on. And Janet wasn't like that. Anyway, there was a crisis in the city in 1971, fiscal crisis. And do you know what happens when there's a fiscal crisis and programs are doing well? They get closed.
They close, that's right.
And so by the time the 71 came, we had achieved the goals that the judge had set out. We had a third black kids, we had a third Latina kids. At that time, Asian kids were not the focus at that time. And we had a third white children. And in the clinic, we also worked with the teachers because many of them were very against this kind of integration. And two of the teachers were from the South. And I remember there was one who kept saying, why are we having these children here? They don't belong here. And so we had to work with all the teachers to really help them understand children are children, and they need the same kind of guidance regardless of where they come from. Anyway, the clinic was closed. And then Janet called me, and by then she had gotten a job at LaGuardia Community College. LaGuardia it hadn't opened yet, but it was just about to open in 1971. And she called me and she said, Fern, I'd like you to come over and teach this course. We just had an agreement with the Board of Ed, the Board of Higher Ed, and the union to move. It was a career ladder program to move paraprofessionals up the ladder to become teachers. And LaGuardia was the recipient. There were other colleges too, but LaGuardia got the grant to do that. And so the college hadn't really opened. It was still Community College number 9. It wasn't called LaGuardia. And so I said, but Janet, I am 6 months pregnant by now, and I am not going to look for a job till we have our baby, and then I can look for another job. And Ismail and I had been married by then. And then she said, she didn't answer me. So she said, now you also have to develop the curriculum. And you have to develop the curriculum for 2 groups of people. One is those who are on the teacher track and those who are on the social work track. So, I remembered my personality and social adjustment course from Graduate School of Social Work, and it fitted everybody. And so that's what I did. I developed that course for that group, and I went, was hired for this one semester. It was a 16-week program. And I met with this 26 students in my classroom. They were all adults. There were 3 men and all these women, and they were great. They were just amazing. And when you work with adults, these are people who are working. Their time is very valuable. They have other responsibilities, so they take their work really seriously. So they did everything that had to be done, and they were successful. And we had such a wonderful time together. And so they met the president. There was a president of the college. He was new. Joe Schenker was the president. And we invited him to come in and talk with them. We invited everybody to come and talk with them. And they had a wonderful time, and they learned. And so when the program ended, I thought this was it, because it was just for this one semester. So when I got back home, I got a call within a week or so that they wanted me to apply for the full-time job for the Paris. Anyway, I got that job and was at LaGuardia for 17 years. And the paraprofessional program is one I'll never forget, because I just loved working with the paras. And I think one of my former students is here. They were just a wonderful group, and we've kept in touch all these years, and they did really great things. They went on, many of them went on to become teachers in the public schools. And then, of course, that program was closed eventually. Yes. And they had the teachers the paras going to all the colleges throughout CUNY, which was very different. When you have a special program, I believe in special programs. When you have a special program, you can do a lot for the people who are in that program. When you have to be part of I'm going to say masses, but I don't really mean it negatively, but if it's too much like every other program, something gets missing. Mm-hmm. So I love developing programs that are very focused on helping a group of people, and I learn as much. Almost all the programs that I've worked with, I knew nothing about them beforehand, but I learned from the people. When I was asked to direct a deaf program to start it, I didn't know anything about deafness at all. I said to my dean, she was she was the one who hired me, and she said, "Fern, do you know anything about deafness?" I said, "No, I don't. Do you?" She said, "No." But then she said, "Let's go find out." And so we both went to Gallaudet University. At that time it was a college, and in Washington, and we learned so much. We spent a whole day on campus. We had to learn how to use interpreters. We didn't know who to look at. We kept looking from one to the other, from the interpreter to the person who was speaking. And the dean was deaf, the one we met with. And when we came home that night, we both felt exhausted. So why do we feel so tired? It was because we were doing like this. The whole day we were doing like this. You should never look at the interpreter. You look at the person you're talking to. And if we had known that, you would have saved us a lot of energy. But I learned. But it was a fascinating program. I learned so much about it. And I'll give you just a little example. We hired individuals who were deaf to run the program too. And we always hired deaf people in that program because representation is so important. And because of that, LaGuardia grew. People talked about LaGuardia because we had a deaf program. His name was Glenn Anderson. And Glenn played basketball. And he was known in the deaf community. So whenever he went out, he could talk about LaGuardia's program. So we got a lot of people. So when I left LaGuardia, we had 500 deaf people on campus, you know. But one of them was Dorothy Pakula. She was from Russia. She worked in the public school system, and she was a lovely woman, very energetic, and she had some language, possibly Indian. She could talk, but she signed. So one day she said to me, "Fern, we need to run a workshop on idioms for deaf people." I said, "Idioms? Why would we do that?" She said, "When you talk to hearing people and you tell them, look outside, it's raining cats and dogs," and they look outside, a deaf person will say, "Where are the cats and dogs?" So they take things literal. So she said, "We have to do something like that." I said, "We got that done." We offered a course in idioms for the deaf population, and it was very popular. Anyway, all right, so that's it.
That was good. That was good. Well, I was trying to get you to talk a little bit about the long trip.
Yeah.
And why you restarted that. I was curious how that came about and what led you, and then there's a question in there about the long trip. And then I think opening
Well,
up.
I have to tell the truth. It's not that I start these programs.
Restarted.
Somebody always says something to me, and then then we get things going. So Carol Hillman, some of you may know Carol Hillman. She was an alum at Bank Street. She was also an instructor. She was a farmer. She still is a farmer today in Massachusetts. Just a wonderful human being. And we were sitting on the board at Bank Street. She was an alumni trustee. And she said to me, "I've been thinking about restarting the long trips." So I said, "What are they?" And because I didn't know anything about them. And she began to tell me about them. And I said, wow, it sounded really fascinating because Lucy Sprague Mitchell, who founded Bank Street, used to take her students on these long trips. And they went all over they went to West Virginia, they went to Tennessee, they visited places where reform was happening. And also they visited the coal mines, and they would go into the mines to understand what coal miners went through. So the approach was very Bank Street. It's experiential. You go out and you do what other people are doing, and you learn by doing. And so we talked about it, and then we said, let's do it. And so we got together a group, and the first long trip was in Asheville, North Carolina. Wow. That trip was amazing. I mean, we had Joan, do you remember No, Joan Bloss. Joan Bloss was there. We had also, who am I thinking of? Anyway, we had a lot of people on the trip. We also had Sarah Curlin, who had been a trustee for many years, had also been chair of the board some years earlier, and she was just a wonderful individual. And she came. She had been on the first long trips. Now there were long trips beforehand, but they were stopped during the 50s because of political goings on, and Bank Street was almost being observed because it was a time when communism was rampant, at least the fear of, and so they had to stop the long trips because there were rumors. And so what we were doing was really to restart them. And we went to Asheville. I connected, one of the things we always do first is to call the area wherever we want to go to find alumni. And with the alumni, I would plan what they thought we could do there, and we would work together to come up with an agenda for the trip. And so they were very much a part of the long trip. And this particular person was Julie. Her name was Julie, and she agreed to drive us around. She worked at the university there, and she was able to get their van free. And she said, I will drive you all around. And so we got to, we went to different places, we went to schools, and everywhere we went, we left Bank Street books or bags with people so that they would know how much we appreciated coming to see them. Now, what we learned during that time was that Julie, she was about to graduate from Bank Street. She was on the train, and she had left her dissertation on the train and never went back didn't even tell her advisor. She just left. And so when we heard the story, we said, we can't leave you like this. You have to get back to Bank Street. And so we talked her into, and we connected her to the person at Bank Street who she should talk with so that she could really re-enlist and get her master's degrees. And she did, and we watched her walk the next year. She graduated. So, on every trip something happened. But overall, I would say everywhere we went, people were so happy and amazed that we were coming to learn about them. They did not resent it. As a matter of fact, they were touched, they were moved. And so we often invited them to dinner with us or to lunch, whatever it was. We got them involved. So it wasn't just Bank Street, taking advantage of. No, it was a joint effort. And everywhere we went, we were accepted. That's okay. So, you want to say anything else?
No.
Maybe we could just open up to the audience. So if you have questions or comments, or even if you have participated in a long trip and want to say something, please do.
And if you want to send compliments, and which were your favorite parts of the book, she'd love to hear that too.
Jeanette.
Hello, my name is Jeanette Reed. Good evening. I was a part of many of the Bank Street long trips. I'm a retired superintendent, principal of the New York City Public School system, and I gone to Jamaica, Finland, Denmark, Savannah, and Tennessee. And Cuba. How can I forget Cuba? One of the things that I learned about Fern, and I'm hearing wonderful things here, which I already knew. Everything that she did for this school and other schools, she did that wherever we went. And she had such a presence and was so graceful. And I don't care what happened. When you go on a trip with a lot of people, things happen. She's unflappable. She always had a smile, no matter what happened, it was taken care of. And I said, boy, I have to learn from her because I would be sweating when things went wrong. But I learned so much from those trips about not just the place, but the schools, the civilizations, and she always brought to us the sense that we learn from them and they learn from us. And I couldn't wait when I left Finland. This is a funny story because she brought principals and other educators to my school. I was a principal then as a part of an extended visit. But I saw their schoolroom, the teacher's room, and it was beautiful. It had books, and it was colorful. And I said, boy, I gotta get back there. And I had my custodian painting and doing everything to make it a more comfortable place for teachers to relax and go in there and do the best job they could for our children. But I learned so much from those long trips. It was a part that I brought back with me, but I learned so much from you and Carol.
I'm glad you raised that you did go outside the country also.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Because that was one of the things that interested me, that the long trips really did expand again to being not just part of the United States, but to all these different cultures and places. I wanted to ask you, Fern, since we shared being at LaGuardia and being at Bank Street, two very, very different places, not just that one is a community college and one is a graduate school and school for children, but two very different cultures. You bridge that in a way, doing work in some ways similar and some ways different. What do you really see as the major differences and similarities, and why you were able to do those things in that way?
That's a good question.
Hard question.
Well, you know, I've thought about that for a while, and I think I may have written a little about it, but when I was thinking about the differences between Bank Street and LaGuardia, I figured there really wasn't a lot of actual difference, except in terms of there being a graduate school and community college. That's one difference. But the opportunities that were available in both places for anyone, not just me, but for anyone to grow and to develop and to use whatever creative ideas you have, happen to be readily available in both places. The other thing I noticed was that Bank Street has a philosophy that's very specific. It's the developmental interaction approach. LaGuardia didn't have that approach. LaGuardia was a community college whose stated mission was to enhance the development of the community and the people who lived in the community. The programs that I developed in both places were meeting needs. So all that I did in both places was to, with my colleagues, identify the needs in each one and develop the kinds of programs which would help us to meet those needs. So in general, I felt that I worked the same way in both places. They were all about developing programs. They were all about helping underserved people to get served in a way that was respectful and would really make a difference. And that was it. It's not, there wasn't any other profound differences. It was just in terms of Bank Street being developmental interaction, LaGuardia being sort of, using the research. Bank Street, LaGuardia did use whatever knowledge we had from the research to develop our proposals and to get funded and so on. But both of them succeeded. So thank you for that. Yes, Judith. Hi, Judith.
Hi. So, hi, everybody.
So I taught Fern's kids as well as worked in the division with her, and I could tell you lots of stories. And so could Davy is standing back there. So one of the things that and by the way, one of my goals was to get Fern to say something negative.
Really?
Because you can see, she never does that. Always was trying to make it happen. So, one of the things that I was interested in, when you said you were sending your kids to Bank Street,
Mhm.
in the book, you never said why you chose Bank Street.
Oh, I didn't?
No.
Second
I
edition.
Could you hear over there? Yes? Well, remember I mentioned this Dr. Lieberman before, Janet Lieberman? So she had a very close friend whose name was Rebecca Strauss. Rebecca Strauss was the dean of the School for Children. I met Rebecca through Janet years ago when Bank Street was on Bank Street. And I got a tour of Bank Street down in the village. And then then Rebecca said to me, when you have children, call me. Okay? And so I at that time I wasn't even thinking of having children. But I was hired by I can't remember who his name now, but someone here at Bank Street at the time. Bank Street had a counseling program, and I was hired as an adjunct as an advisor to work with 3 students, graduate students in counseling. And I did that one semester, and within a year or two, the program closed, unfortunately. So Bank Street once had a counseling program, but as the Board of Ed began to decline in terms of hiring more and more counselors, there just weren't enough counselors available and openings to train them. So to answer your story directly, when Rebecca told me to call her, and when I had Yusuf, our first son.
He's over there.
Hi, Yusuf.
Where's the third one?
Him.
Oh, he's
So when so I came I had gone to different schools, and I saw many of them. I went to Manhattan Country School. I went to some other that I don't remember, but they were fine. But then I came to Bank Street. And when I opened that door and I saw that tree, I just loved the idea of a tree where children were. And I said, this is where I want my son to go. And then I called Rebecca. And she set up an interview. He was interviewed, did whatever they had to do, and he got in. That was why I chose Bank Street.
So the tree.
The tree.
The tree. Yes.
Forget about developmentally.
No, the tree.
It's good to learn these things.
Yeah. So, does anyone have any questions? Yes. Marcella.
Hi, Fern. I loved the part of the book about your childhood in Jamaica. It was so evocative. I felt like I was really there. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious about your education as a young person and how that, what did you take from that to influence you as an educator yourself?
Well, Jamaica had a very traditional kind of education for everybody, because we were still under British rule. So before I left Jamaica, we were still a colony of Britain. So all our curriculum came from England. Our examination to graduate from high school, the set books came from England. They were sent back. All our answers were sent back to England, corrected there. They didn't know us. Corrected there and sent back. And the announcements were put in the papers. However, when I went to high school, And this is really exciting for me. My high school was founded by a local Jamaican. And to me, that was one of the most exciting things, because all the really good high schools in Jamaica, especially in Kingston, were all founded by English people for their children. And over the years, you know, and high school was very hard to get into in the 40s and the 50s. You had to take an exam. Very few students qualified for that exam. Once you, at elementary school, most people finished in elementary school. To get into high school, you had to take an exam. And then you prayed for a scholarship because you had to pay. And so when I graduated from elementary school, the last year, myself and my friends were saying, I just hope we'll get into high school and we'll get a scholarship, because high school sounded wonderful. You weren't caned. In elementary school, you were caned. Of course, it's the English system, you were beaten and you were caned. But when you went to high school, there was no caning. And there were punishments for if you, but there no caning. So high school sounded great. So my school was founded by Mr. Powell. He was Wesley Powell. He was a Methodist, and many of the schools in Jamaica were founded by religious groups, you know. So my school was founded by this Methodist. And the church took it over eventually, but it was a secular school. But Mr. Powell started the school on his veranda with 5 students. And he would tell us the story every chance he got. That he started the school with 5 students on the veranda. The teachers were himself, his father, his cousin, and somebody else. And they sent those 5 students up for the Cambridge exam, and all 5 passed, which was history making. And so he decided to expand. The end of the first year, he had something like 30 students. They all passed. And then he decided that he had to get an education, a formal education. So he came to Teachers College. And he didn't go to England, he went to Teachers College, right? And he got his bachelor's and his master's in 3 years. He said he never saw the light of day because he was studying all the time. And he got his master's degree in international education. But what fascinated me was that at Teachers College during that time, there were many progressive educators there at that time, including John Dewey, and there was a Dr. Candell, but he met all these people. And so I think what happened, he got all this progressive education thing. So when he went back to Jamaica, he knew he couldn't impose them immediately because people would be upset. They didn't think American education was that high as English. They really did. So he did little things. He just gradually introduced things slowly. The first thing he did was to enroll people who were over 13. In the 40s and 50s, if you passed age 13, you couldn't get into a high school. That was it for you. So you had to go to a commercial school or whatever you wanted to career-wise. That was it. And so he started a class for children who were now going into age 14, which was never done in all the wonderful high schools in Jamaica. So this was a first. And that class, because the children were older, they were more mature. They were a year more mature than us who came in at 13. And those students, I remember that class of 14-year-olds, they did just spectacular work and worked very hard. My class had a lot of scholarship students, and maybe the whole class was all scholarship students, but we were so proud because we got scholarships, you know. And then he began to allow teachers to go abroad to study, and they could borrow money from a fund that he set up. So he did a lot of little things that were never done before in Jamaica, and he also brought in extracurricular activities for children that you could choose what you wanted to do outside of what was the required courses. So he did these little things, and so I always felt very proud of him, because first he was a local Jamaican, and he was very sharp, and plus he drilled it into us. You know, he would tell us the story over and over again. And we all wore uniforms to school. We had to be well behaved on the street, because if people reported on you that we saw an Excelsior student and they were eating food on the street, it would be sent back to school. It was not a good thing to do. So even today, I said, I find it hard to eat on the street. I can't eat on the street. But those are the kinds of things in my school that really, and I was introduced to, we knew all the poems from the English poems. We knew all the songs from Ireland, Scotland, England. We knew all of them. We could sing all of them. And I remember we had to study the Canterbury Tales in both the Old English and knowing how to translate it. So those things you never forget. So it was a good time. It was a very good time. I'm sure it's not today. It's not like that at all. But in my days, it was wonderful. And we also had the largest numbers of children in my high school. We had 500 students in my high school, whereas the other selective schools had like 250, 300, But anyway, that's it.
Everyone be the last one.
Okay.
All right.
How did being a parent of Main Street kids influence you as an educator? Because you were in grad school, your kids are here. Not dissimilar to my life, right? So I have 3 sons, just like you. And I just wonder about that. But I'm also a product of Bank Street. I'm a kid who grew up with one of your kids. And so I just wonder, like, that interaction of you being in grad school, right? And in that world of administration, your kids are growing up at Bank Street. Like, what was the reciprocity and learning that happened between your kids being here, influencing you, but you also influencing our school?
Can you answer that?
Yeah.
It sounded like you're asking what we taught her. Was that?
I want to know what she learned from having you here,
Yeah.
but you can't answer that.
Yeah, no,
You
I
should
should
answer. Yusuf, where are you,
I think you can
Yusuf?
answer.
Remember me, Yusuf? I was in between Yusuf and Nafis,
Yeah.
right, with Javaid.
Yes.
So Javaid and I graduated together
Yes.
in 19-something. We went to another school together.
It's a very good question.
But what did you learn? Like, I'm just curious about it because I'm a grad student of graduate school here.
Yeah.
Then my kids go here, and I think about, I'm a teacher here at Bank Street
That's
now.
right.
And I think about what I learned as a teacher here, as a grad student. Like, there's something that we choose to put our kids here, but like we also learn something, but we also give back, and we try to influence and change. But I'm curious, like, what was that journey like for you on all those levels, as a mother, as an educator, professional, like all of that? And I know the book, I'm gonna get it when it comes out.
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. I really enjoyed and learned a lot from my children because every class they were in, there was something new and different. And what they were learning, I was learning too. Because, the school initially was new to me. I knew very little about schools, elementary schools in America. I had no idea about their curriculum. But I wanted my children to be in a safe space because I didn't know enough about the public schools. I didn't go to one. And I sought out schools that reminded me of my own school in Jamaica, really. And not that it was so progressive in Jamaica, but it was the good time. The teachers made all the difference. And I think my children really had really positive experiences here They learned so much. I used to hear so much about the market, for example. All three of them went through the market experience. And I participated in all those experiences. I would be a parent doing different things, right? So I was learning a lot alongside them about Bank Street and about Bank Street's philosophy. And then I became a parent trustee. So I began to see another side. I began to see what was happening from the administrative side, from the trustee side. And that was an eye-opener, because I began to learn about the budget, and you began to learn about the tuition and why it had to go up. And there were all these things that normally as a parent you're not worried about, except when you see the increase in tuition. So that was those were some of the important things, And then I became sort of an ambassador for the school. Parents would call me and ask me if they were thinking of sending their children. And I could tell them what I knew and what I experienced. It would probably be different because I look for different things. I look to see if my children are happy, when they come home, if they have good information to tell me, if they have friends, if they visit their friends and have their friends come to our house, which they did a lot. So, those are the things that you look for as a parent. And then whenever, for example, if parents were needed for certain things, they would call on me as one of the parents. And I worked on many of the sales, one of their, what do they call them? Their the fairs, yes, definitely. And was active in those. But one of my most amazing experiences as a parent, Betsy Hall, who was the director of admission, had invited me to attend a new parent orientation, because I had been a parent here. And so I came and saw everybody, said hello. But then I saw one person standing by himself, so I went over to him and greeted him, and he started signing to me. And I thought, wow, there's no sign language. So I'm saying, you're signing. Well, how do you know sign language? And he said, I work. It still didn't tell me anything. And so I began to tell him about LaGuardia and about the program at LaGuardia, that he must go and see the program there at LaGuardia, because the program was amazing, and so on. I went on and on. So I saw Betsy in the corner looking at me and making all kinds of gestures, and then when I was finished, I bid him good night, and I went over to her and I said, what was happening? What were you trying? She said, do you know who you were talking to? I said, no. What? That was William Hurt. Oh, I said, I didn't know that. And I said, I never recognized famous people. But I said, I really didn't know him, and I'm so glad I didn't know him, because I would not have talked to them if I had known him.
Yeah, you would have. And he only knew how to sign because he was in the play.
Yes. But I didn't recognize him. I don't recognize famous people. No. So that was. Did I answer your question? Did you get some answer?
Wonderful answer.
Well, I think that was the last question, right?
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
Okay.
but I want to invite all of you to mingle and partake in some of this wonderful food that we brought for you, and continue the conversations amongst yourselves and with Fern as we close up. And just to let you know that, we don't have books here to buy, but the QR codes are around.
Yes.
We have cards here. There's a poster toward the back. Scan the card. It gives you an option to buy from a few different places. And thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it.
buy a book, what?
They have a QR code. Want me to get you one?
I want to buy a book.
Okay. Send us the
Oh, here it comes.
Go ahead.
I love